primer is on. I'm trying to use up the last little bit of red primer that I got stuck with. That's why the different color. And now for the full disclosure. So despite my best efforts at sealing the foam, I actually thought I had done a pretty good job of sealing it. Some of the primer managed to still get up underneath the foam, and it has created some problem areas. There is a little bit of eating along here, here, and a couple other little spots right here. Now it seems to be just limited to the top. The sides and the bottom are really not in bad shape.
This problem was caused by just too much thinner left in the brush. Whenever I use a brush to paint, I always condition it first by dipping it in the appropriate thinner and then rolling out the excess on paper towel. In this case, there was just too much thinner remaining in the brush, and those first few swipes along the top of the cowl were too thin and got up underneath the blue foam.
What I'm going to do is use a filler over the whole thing. I was going to end up using filler anyway to fill in all the little small dents and dings and gouges, so it's really not setting me back too much. What I'm going to use is epoxy and micro balloons. That's about the only thing that I have enough material to do this whole cowl. The blue foam plug has been repaired. This time I used white micro balloons instead of the brown ones. The white gave me a better contrast to the red primer underneath, so I could tell when to stop sanding. Then I added a little bit of Bondo automotive spot putty, the red stuff, to fill in some smaller depressions. So this cowl, or the plug, is very tough now. It's very hardened up with the epoxy and the micro balloons, and it's now ready for a coat of primer and then a sand back. At this point, the cowl has had 2 coats of primer, and it's had sanding between each coat, plus it's received the epoxy micro balloons. That's the white stuff you see. They kind of fill in where the first coat of primer kind of ate away the foam a little bit. I think I spent 10 to 15 hours sanding all of this, getting it ready. But I think it's now ready for its fiberglass. I've given it some thought. I didn't know whether I wanted to do one continuous piece of fiberglass or break it up into 2. I realized it was going to be a little bit hard, particularly around this area right here with the multiple compound curves. If I tried to do one piece, I'd actually have to raise the nose vertically and try to lay the fiberglass over like this, and I thought that was just going to be a big huge mess. So I've decided to go with 2 pieces. Now on the real airplane, it's a 2-piece cowl, and the demarcation is right about here, basically through the center of the spinner, and over to the other side as well. So I've marked that out with some ink pen. I'm hoping that that line transfers to the fiberglass. What I've done on this part, I've put down some yellow plastic covering. I didn't think I could do the whole model, particularly up here with this section right here, without getting a lot of wrinkles and crinkles. And so what I'm doing is just this basically flat area, and just basically on top. The bottom I'm gonna not do anything to, and then I've added some clear packing tape. The black line here marks where the end of this cowl will go. Alright, so I have a nice thin coat of Vaseline over everything. I extended it down a little bit below the line all the way around. For the epoxy, I'm using a long pot life. It's at least a 45-minute pot life finishing resin epoxy. It works very well. I'm going to use 5 ounce per square yard fiberglass for this. I'm going to use 3 pieces of that, and then I'm going to use 1 piece of 3/4 ounce fiberglass for the top piece to aid in finishing. The one thing about the Vaseline or the petroleum jelly that I really like is it has a nice way of grabbing the first layer of fiberglass that you put down. Kind of grabs it and holds it in place so it doesn't move around so much. Now I did fit this, if you will, especially up here. I wanted to see how difficult it was going to be to maintain this curve, and then along the cowl ring. And I tried different orientations of the fiberglass. I even tried a 45-degree bias fiberglass, and it all kind of seemed to be the same. So I just cut this basically straight 90-degree from the roll. The two sides right here I'm going to have to cut. I think what I'm going to do is cut right along the curve, and then this piece right here overlap it back over. I use a playing card, cut in half, to smooth out my initial coat of epoxy. When I'm done, I just toss the card. That way I don't have to mess with cleaning out a brush. It's dirt cheap and takes a lot less effort. Now I am having a little bit of difficulty with this fiberglass wanting to stay down on this cowl ring. Now for this layer I'm going to use a stiffer plastic card and try to squeeze some of the excess epoxy from the first layer up into the second layer before I apply any new. Once I've pulled up as much of the excess resin from the previous layer with the stiff plastic card, I'll add fresh resin to the white areas, which means the fiberglass doesn't have any resin. And finally, the 3/4 ounce layer. Okay, 3 layers of 5 ounce cloth, and then the 1 3/4 ounce cloth on top of that. Everything seems to be laying fairly well, with the exception of the cowl ring. I knew this was going to be difficult, and it's hard to get this one to sit down, but the edges over here I think came out pretty nicely. The 3/4 ounce cloth really helped to kind of close the gap that was there with the cutting the 5 ounce cloth. While the resin was still in its green state, I applied peel ply. For me, this peel ply is 100% polyester, and let me emphasize the 100% part, and it's sometimes known as China silk. I used a stiff plastic card and tried to pull up any and all excess resin from the layers underneath up into the peel ply. This helps to greatly reduce weight and produces a very nice smooth finish, which requires less work to prepare the part for paint. Got a bubble underneath there.
I think the only real difference between the trademarked peel ply and 100% polyester is that the trademarked peel ply has a release agent added to it. But as you'll see, it's not really that difficult to remove the polyester fabric from the cured part.
So I applied the peel ply. In my case, it's just 100% polyester. And as long as you don't see any white spots, like these white spots here, that would mean that there's not enough epoxy, but that's well below my line that I'm going to sand or cut and sand to. So I'm not worried about that. I'm also not going to worry about the front part. I know this is not going to make the curve, and I risk messing up the fiberglass underneath. So this right here is as far as I'm going to take the peel ply. It's been about 20 hours. It's ready to pull the peel ply. I did get a little bit of a bubble right here in the peel ply. That's going to require a little bit of extra work. Fix that. Shouldn't be too bad. Let's go ahead and pull the peel ply and see how it looks. Overall, feels pretty good. There are a few areas. There's that bubble right there. Looks like the actually the fiberglass, the 3/4 ounce fiberglass, actually pulled up a little bit. So that'll require a little bit of work. Just some sanding and some automotive body putty filler. But overall, not bad. It's time to pull this off so I can trim to my line on both sides. I don't want to leave this on when I do the bottom because I don't want the bottom fiberglass coming over the top of this and then creating kind of a lip. When I join these two together, I want them to basically be flush along the seam. Instead of trying to peel this off and possibly deforming the fiberglass, first thing I'm going to try to do is use air, compressed air, to see if I can just get it to pop off on its own. I think that's it. All right. And we have one top half of the cowl. Now it's a little bit, I don't know if I want to say flimsy, but once the bottom cowl and the top cowl get joined together, I think it'll work out pretty nicely. Let me see if I can show you. So you can see the little pin line. That's going to be my cut to, sand to line. What's interesting about the cut line is it stopped right here. So it transferred from here to here to the fiberglass or the epoxy, but this part did not transfer. Yeah, apparently the ink was absorbed into the red primer, whereas with the plastic covering, it just sits on top, and therefore it's much easier to be absorbed by the resin. So the cut to line was transferred to the outside of the part. The first thing to do cleaning up this top part was to cut within 1/16 of an inch of my line all the way around. I found sometimes if I try to cut right on the line, sometimes the fiberglass seems to kind of delaminate, and then I have to go in with some thin CA. So I've gotten in the habit of cutting about 1/16 of an inch wide, and that seems to kind of fix that problem. As far as the back, I'm going to leave it a little bit longer, looks like about almost 1/4 of an inch, so that when I get the bottom piece on, I can come back in with the top and remove the battery hatch and then sand this down so it's right flush with the end of the fuselage. So for now, this is as far as I'm going to take the top. For the bottom half of the cowl, I'm going to do a little bit differently this time. I'm going to cut the fiberglass on a 45-degree bias. I already checked it and it did seem to help this right here, this little transition. I probably should have done that with the top. I've given all the bottom a good wipe down with Vaseline and I'm ready to apply the fiberglass. Now, the first two pieces are going to be a little bit heavier weight than before. These are 5.8 ounce per square yard. I ran out of the 5 ounce per square yard. So I'll use 2 of these and then 1 of the 5 ounce and then again the 3/4 ounce on top. Cutting at a 45-degree bias, it does help the cloth sit a little bit nicer, especially at the transition right here. That sits much better. But I don't particularly like using it much because it can be kind of wasteful. But yes, it does do a much better job with making this transition. Next afternoon, been about 22 hours to cure. Let's remove the peel ply. Went ahead and marked my cut to line or my sand to line all the way around on the outside. And once again, I'm going to use compressed air to try to get this to pop off. I have 3 areas that are giving me trouble. Here, and these 2 areas right here. Everything else is free. Ultimately, I had to get a little thin blade chisel and go up underneath for this, and that popped that one free. And then these 2 are the last ones. This one I managed to pop free. This one, it really caused me some trouble. And to get the chisel up in there, or to get the scraper up in there, I kind of cracked the fiberglass here a little bit. I think I can fix that without too much trouble. But I think this is ready to come off. I'm probably going to tear out some of the plug at this point. But remember, this is a sacrificial plug, so at this point, it really doesn't matter. All right, yeah. This right here is what really caused me some trouble. But I think I can repair that. Probably just a little bit of CA would be good enough, maybe a little bit of reinforcement. The cowl's been trimmed all the way around with the exception of this lower aft part. I'm gonna leave that a little bit long until I get the cowl joined. I have it trimmed just to the inside of the battery hatch so there's no interference when opening the battery hatch. Got a pretty nice fit all along the seam. I still have some more flattening to do along the front here where the fiberglass kind of stuck out a little bit, but the fit is what I was working on today, and it's actually pretty nice. The tape doesn't really want to hold that well, but anyway, that all looks really nice. I'm happy with that. I weighed the cowl, and both pieces together come out at right at 200 grams, which is 7 ounces. Now all the inside balsa foam, that will all be removed. But before I do that, I want to get the cowl joined. I'm gonna have it joined while it's still sitting on the blue foam, and that gives me a good solid base to work with. And to join it, I'm going to use, my intention right now is to use some plastic, some styrene from the edge of the fuselage forward, and then I will go back along with some fiberglass and do the entire seam and include the fiberglass all the way to the back. I think that'll give me a nice strong joint with minimal amount of weight.
And this will all be covered in the next video, Part C.